I told my husband he's got to come out of retirement and be in charge of this because, he's got more ideas a minute than anybody I know. Got to put people back to work.
That was Hillary Clinton talking about the role Bill Clinton might play if she wins in November. We're back with our panel, and there has been a lot of talk about Bill Clinton this week. Some of it you just heard, positive. Governor Brewer, Donald Trump also talking about Bill Clinton's past infidelities, calling Hillary Clinton an enabler. Is that, will that work? I mean, forget whether or not it's right or wrong. Will that even work, or do you think it might turn some voters off?
Well, it appears to me that the left, including Hillary, is trying to wind her campaign around women's issues. And certainly they have a record that they can either deny or they can agree to. But they have not been forthright in regards to how they have treated women on both sides of it, and they've got a record.
You mean not as a policy issue, but specifically with these individual infidelities?
Yeah, absolutely. And they need. I mean, the whole world knows about it.
So why not bring it up? What do you think, Congressman?
Well, first, if this is going to be a campaign about jobs and paychecks, I think Hillary Clinton's going to say, "Let's go at it." That's what she wants, and she's got a partner who knows about jobs and paychecks, so there's no problem with that. The second problem, I think, for Republicans on this issue is they should have a messenger who hasn't had multiple marriages and doesn't have his own problems with women. So I think it's going to focus on jobs and paychecks, and there is no one who's talking more about that than Hillary Clinton.
Well, yeah, but Hillary Clinton continually talks about that Donald Trump is abusive, if you will, to women, that he can't win the women's vote. Well, women do appreciate him, and they have a problem in their own house, and they have to recognize that, and it needs to be acknowledged.
But the American people get lost in all of this. I mean, the American people get lost in this soap opera. If it is between, which I still hope, Senator Bernie Sanders is the best candidate to go head-to-head with Mr. Trump, but if it is between the secretary and Mr. Trump, and it turns into this soap opera about their personal lives, the everyday American people are going to get lost. You cannot win that argument. What about what it is going to take, the issues and the ideas that it is going to take to lift this country? Now, they can't have it both ways. Either side cannot have it both ways.
The only candidate out there that has created any jobs has been Donald Trump. He's got a record. He's the only
but it's not
Let me just let Amanda wants to get in here. Let me just ask you, what do you think about this? Because as you just heard, Democrats will say that Donald Trump is in not just a glass house, but a glass Trump tower, if you will, in terms of questions about his past behavior.
Here's the thing that strikes me odd about Trump's comments is that he brought up Bill Clinton's transgressions and appears to totally give Bill Clinton a free pass and is instead upset about Hillary Clinton's reaction to what Bill did. I think that's sort of tone deaf. If you're going to talk about the issue, you should do it in a very considered way and address it as a full issue. So there's a problem with just blaming Hillary on that. Right. But also, if Hillary Clinton wants to counter Donald Trump on his #1 issue of jobs and manufacturing, she cannot outsource that to her husband. It looks weak. She needs to own that issue and go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump if she hopes to beat him on it.
Governor, if Donald Trump wants to talk about jobs, which I think is one of the main reasons why he won, honestly, talking about trade deals, talking about jobs going overseas or going to Mexico, why interject something that will get so much attention like talk about Bill Clinton's transgressions? Why do that?
Because Hillary brought it up. She's the one that brought up the issue of the women, and that the women didn't like him, and that he spoke derogatory about the women, and he went back and hit her. And she was shocked. She has never been in a campaign like that. But she's
somebody has to be the adult in the room, though,
But
Governor.
you're absolutely.
I mean,
we need to have, the economy and jobs and safety. That should be what we're all concerned about when we talk about everything else. But we are not going to sit still. Donald is not going to sit still and not address the issue.
But I think she said something in like December or January, and then he attacked her, and then she backed off and hasn't said that. But Congressman, go ahead.
Jay, tee it up. If that's going to be the debate, one about who is trying to fight for women to have opportunity to finally get paid equally to men, if it's going to be about who can help create jobs, not just whimsically declare bankruptcy and cost a lot of Americans their jobs, we're ready. I think Secretary Clinton, as Amanda said, will talk about this because she has plans on how to create jobs. She has done that, and so she's ready for it. But Donald Trump he's got to be very careful throwing that first stone.
Governor,
Hillary talks about creating jobs. Donald Trump has created
I want
jobs.
to do
The
one quick
record.
thing, because in addition to the women's vote, Republicans are concerned about the Latino vote. On Cinco de Mayo, Donald Trump tweeted this. It's a message, happy Cinco de Mayo, the best taco bowls are made in Trump Tower Grill. I love Hispanics, exclamation point.
Shallow.
Congressman, your take?
So while he was doing that, Hillary Clinton was in California talking to thousands of California voters, a lot of them Latino, touching the flesh, telling people what she would do to help them have a better future, talking about their children, talking about reforming our immigration laws that are broken. And he's telling us taco
It's
salad
shallow.
is
It's
because he
shallow.
loves
I mean, he
the
doesn't
circus
know.
The worst
atmosphere.
part about
It's
it is
intentional.
he's so wrong. That's not where you're not going to get your best taco salad in a Trump tower. Come to East LA. I'll tell you where you get some really good food.
But
the guy is
distilling-
off base in so many
distilling
respects.
an ethnic group down in that way is just wrong.